The morning sun rose over Brookhaven like it did every other day, painting the sky in shades of pink and orange. The small coastal town was just beginning to wake up. Seagulls called from the harbor, fishing boats prepared for the day's work, and shop owners opened their doors to greet the new day. Theresa Holt stood at the window of her small apartment above the Anchor restaurant. She held a cup of coffee in her weathered hands and watched the town come to life. At 67 years old, she had lived in Brookhaven for 15 years. To everyone in town, she was simply the kind woman who owned the seafood restaurant on Harbor Street. Nobody knew about her past. Nobody knew who she really was. She finished her coffee and went downstairs to prepare the restaurant for the day. The Anchor was not a fancy place. It had wooden tables, simple decorations, and pictures of the sea on the walls. But the food was excellent, and the atmosphere was warm. Local fishermen brought their fresh catch to Theresa every morning, and she turned it into delicious meals. "Morning, Theresa," called out Tom Bradley as he entered through the back door. Tom was one of the local fishermen, a man in his 50s with rough hands and a kind smile. "Got some beautiful cod for you today. The catch was perfect this morning." "Thank you, Tom," Theresa said with a gentle smile. "How is your daughter doing? Is she feeling better?" "Much better, thanks for asking. Your soup helped a lot last week. Sarah said it was the best thing she'd eaten while being sick." Theresa nodded. This was her life now. Simple conversations, caring about her neighbors, running her small restaurant. It was peaceful. It was safe. It was everything her old life was not. As Tom left, Theresa began preparing the fish. Her hands moved with practiced efficiency, cleaning and filleting with expert precision. These were skills she had learned long ago, but not in a restaurant kitchen. She had learned them on the deck of a ship, in the middle of the ocean, when fresh food was precious and every skill mattered. But she pushed those thoughts away. That was another life, another person. The restaurant opened at 11 o'clock, and soon the first customers arrived. The Anchor was popular with both locals and the few tourists who found their way to Brookhaven. Theresa moved between tables, greeting people by name, recommending dishes, asking about their families. "Mrs. Holt!" called out little Emma Chen, who came in with her mother. Emma was 8 years old, with bright eyes and endless curiosity. "Can you tell me another ocean story today?" Theresa's smile was warm but careful. "Maybe a short one, after you eat your lunch." Emma's mother, Linda, laughed. "Emma loves your stories. She wants to be a sailor when she grows up now." "The sea is beautiful," Theresa said softly, "but it demands respect." She often told children simple stories about the ocean, stories about dolphins and whales, about beautiful sunsets and calm waters. But she never told them the real stories. She never told them about the storms that could destroy a ship in minutes. She never told them about the weight of command, the burden of having hundreds of lives depending on your decisions. She never told them about the night she failed. After lunch, Theresa sat with Emma for a few minutes and told her about the time she saw a pod of dolphins swimming alongside a boat. Emma listened with wide eyes, completely absorbed in the tale. "Were you scared?" Emma asked. "No," Theresa replied. "Dolphins are friendly. They were just playing." "I wish I could see dolphins," Emma said dreamily. "Maybe you will someday," Theresa told her. "The world is full of wonders." As Emma and her mother left, Theresa felt the familiar ache in her chest. She loved these interactions with the townspeople, especially the children. But every story she told, every question she answered, reminded her of the life she had left behind. The afternoon passed quietly. Theresa served lunch to the regular customers, chatted with the locals, and prepared food in the kitchen. Around 3 o'clock, Pastor Michael Williams came in for his usual coffee and pie. "Afternoon, Theresa," he said, settling into his favorite seat by the window. "How are you today?"
I'm well, Michael. The usual? Please.
Pastor Williams was in his 60s, a thoughtful man who had served Brookhaven's community church for 30 years. He and Theresa had become friends over the years. She appreciated his calm presence and his ability to listen without judgment. As she brought him his coffee and apple pie, he said, "You seem thoughtful today. Everything all right?" Theresa sat down across from him for a moment. The restaurant was nearly empty at this hour. "Just thinking about the past. It happens sometimes." "We all have pasts," Michael said gently. "Sometimes they weigh heavy on us." "I've built a good life here," Theresa said, more to herself than to him. "I'm grateful for it." "But you miss something," Michael observed. It was not quite a question. Theresa looked out the window at the harbor. "I miss the feeling of purpose, of doing something that mattered."
What you do here matters, Michael said firmly. You feed people. You create a warm place where the community gathers. You're kind to everyone. That matters, Theresa.
"I suppose you're right. But you've had another life, haven't you?" Michael asked carefully. "I've never pried, but sometimes I see it in your eyes. You watch the harbor like someone who knows the sea. You read the weather like an expert. You have the bearing of someone who once commanded, not just served." Theresa was quiet for a long moment. Then she said, "Everyone has secrets, Michael." "Indeed they do. And everyone deserves privacy. I just want you to know that whatever your past holds, you're valued here. The person you are now is the person we know and love." "Thank you," Theresa said sincerely. "That means a great deal to me." After Michael left, Theresa went back to work. She cleaned tables, prepared food, managed the small staff she employed. By evening, the dinner crowd arrived, and the anchor filled with conversation and laughter. Tom Bradley returned with his family for dinner. The Johnsons came in to celebrate their anniversary. Young Marcus, who worked at the hardware store, stopped by for takeout. Each person was greeted warmly. Each person felt welcome in Theresa's restaurant. But as Theresa worked, a small part of her mind was always elsewhere. It was always on the sea. It was always on that terrible night 15 years ago. She had been Captain Theresa Holt then, commanding the MV Atlantic Crossing, a massive cargo vessel that traveled between Europe and America. She had worked her way up through the ranks over 25 years, earning every promotion through skill, determination, and leadership. By the time she was 52, she was one of the few female captains commanding major cargo vessels, and she was respected throughout the industry. She had been proud of her career. She had loved the challenge of navigation, the responsibility of command, the satisfaction of bringing her ship safely to port every time. She had weathered countless storms, navigated through fog and ice, made difficult decisions under pressure. She had been good at her job. Very good. Until that night. Theresa closed her eyes briefly as the memory washed over her. She had been navigating through a severe storm in the North Atlantic. The weather forecast had been wrong. The storm had been much worse than predicted. Waves 30 feet high had battered the ship. Wind had screamed through the rigging. Rain had made visibility almost zero. She had made every correct decision. She had changed course. She had ordered the crew to secure everything. She had done everything by the book. But the storm had been too powerful. A young crew member, Peter Morrison, just 23 years old, had been checking the cargo when a massive wave hit. He had been swept overboard before anyone could react. Despite immediate search and rescue efforts, despite doing everything possible, they never found him. The ocean had taken him. Technically, it had not been Theresa's fault. The investigation had cleared her completely. The storm had been unprecedented. Peter had been where he was supposed to be, doing his job. It was a tragedy, but not negligence. But Theresa could not forgive herself. She had been the captain. The crew was her responsibility. Peter had been under her command, and he had died. She had completed that voyage, brought the ship safely to port. She had attended Peter's memorial service, met with his devastated parents. And then she had resigned. She had walked away from the sea, from her career, from everything she had built. She could not command anymore. She could not bear the weight of that responsibility. For months she had drifted. She had savings from years of work, but no purpose. She had traveled aimlessly, trying to escape the memories. Eventually, she had found Brookhaven, a small town far from the major shipping routes. She had seen the empty restaurant space on Harbor Street and had made an impulsive decision. She would stay here. She would open a restaurant. She would never command anything more important than a kitchen again. And for 15 years, that is exactly what she had done. Theresa shook herself from the memories and focused on the present. Mrs. Patterson wanted more bread. The Hendersons were ready for dessert. Young Sarah at table 4 needed a refill of water. This was her life now. Simple tasks, simple pleasures. No storms, no responsibility for lives at sea. The restaurant closed at 9 o'clock. Theresa cleaned up with the help of her 2 employees, Marcus and young Jenny, a college student who worked evenings. They chatted as they worked, talking about local gossip and Jenny's classes. It was comfortable and familiar. "Did you hear about the weather forecast?" Jenny asked as she wiped down tables. "They're predicting heavy rain this weekend. Some kind of big storm system coming." Theresa's hands paused in their work for just a moment. Then she continued washing dishes. "Is that so?" "Yeah, they're saying it could be really bad, like the worst rain in 20 years or something. My professor canceled Monday classes just in case." "People should prepare," Theresa said quietly. "Storms can be dangerous." Marcus laughed. "You always get so serious about weather, Theresa. It's just rain." "Rain can cause flooding," Theresa replied. "Flooding can be very dangerous." "Well, Brookhaven is pretty safe," Jenny said cheerfully. "We're not right on the coast, and the river hardly ever floods. My dad says the last time it flooded was like 50 years ago or something." Theresa nodded but said nothing more. She had learned to read weather patterns during her years at sea. She had learned to spot the signs of dangerous conditions, and something about this forecast made her uneasy. After Marcus and Jenny left, Theresa went upstairs to her apartment. It was small but comfortable, with a view of the harbor from her window. She made herself a cup of tea and sat in her favorite chair, watching the lights of the town. This was her routine. This was her life. And it was enough. It had to be enough. But as she sat there in the quiet evening, she could not shake the feeling that something was coming. The weather forecast had triggered old instincts. She had spent too many years reading the sea and sky to ignore the warning signs. She went to her laptop and checked the weather reports more carefully. The storm system was large and slow-moving. Heavy rain was predicted, possibly several inches in a short period. The river that ran through Brookhaven was already high from recent rains. Theresa studied the forecasts and maps. Her trained eyes saw patterns that others might miss. The geography of the area, the river's course, the expected rainfall amounts, all of it created a concerning picture. She remembered her time as a captain, when she would study weather reports and ocean conditions with this same intensity. She would look at data that others thought was safe and see danger. She had learned to trust those instincts. They had kept her ship safe countless times. But that was before Peter Morrison. Before she had learned that sometimes, no matter how careful you were, no matter how well you prepared, tragedy could still strike. Theresa closed her laptop and went to bed. Tomorrow would be like any other day. She would open the restaurant, serve her customers, be the person everyone in Brookhaven knew. The quiet, kind restaurant owner. Not Captain Holt. Never Captain Holt again. But as she drifted off to sleep, her dreams were of the sea. They were always of the sea. The next morning was Friday, and the anchor was busy with the breakfast crowd. Theresa moved through the restaurant with practiced ease, pouring coffee, taking orders, chatting with customers. Outside, the sky was gray with threatening clouds, but the rain had not started yet. "Morning, Captain," called out old Harry Walsh from his corner table. Theresa's hand trembled slightly as she poured his coffee. "Just Theresa, Harry, you know that." Harry laughed, his weathered face crinkling with amusement. "I keep forgetting. You just have that look about you, you know? Like someone who's used to giving orders. My old captain in the Navy had the same bearing." "I'm just a restaurant owner," Theresa said with a gentle smile, deflecting as she always did. "If you say so," Harry replied, not convinced but willing to let it drop. This happened occasionally. Someone would notice something about the way Theresa carried herself, the way she assessed situations, the way she remained calm when others panicked. But she always deflected, and people eventually accepted her simple explanations. As the morning wore on, the conversation in the restaurant turned to the approaching storm. The weather forecast was now predicting even heavier rainfall than initially expected. Some people were concerned. Others were dismissive. "I've lived here 40 years, declared Mr. Peterson, a retired teacher. "We've had bad storms before. The town always manages fine." "The river is already high, though," noted Mrs. Chen, Emma's mother. "I saw it yesterday. It's higher than I've ever seen it." "It'll be fine," Mr. Peterson insisted. "You young people worry too much." Theresa listened to the debate, but said nothing. She had checked the weather again that morning. The storm system was intensifying. The projected rainfall had increased, and the river was indeed very high. She did not like the combination of factors. But what could she do? She was not a town official. She was not a weather expert, at least not officially. She was just the restaurant owner. Nobody would listen to her concerns, and she had no authority to issue warnings. After lunch, she decided to walk down to the river to see for herself. The restaurant was quiet in the mid-afternoon, and Jenny could handle any customers who came in. The river ran through the center of Brookhaven, with the main business district on one side and residential areas on the other. A stone bridge connected the two sides. Theresa stood on the bridge and looked at the water below. It was very high, just a few feet below the normal banks. The current was stronger than usual, churning with brown sediment. To most people, it probably looked fine. But Theresa saw danger. She could see how little margin there was before the river would overflow. She could see how fast the current was moving. She could calculate in her mind how much additional water from heavy rain would push this over the edge. "Beautiful, isn't it?" said a voice beside her. Theresa turned to see Mayor Robert Chen, Linda's husband. He was a man in his early 50s, genuinely caring about his town, but not experienced in crisis management. Brookhaven was a peaceful place that rarely faced serious problems. "It's high," Theresa observed. "Yes, but the forecast says the rain will pass quickly. We should be fine." He smiled reassuringly. "Don't worry, Theresa. This town has survived for over 100 years. A little rain won't hurt us." Theresa wanted to say more. She wanted to explain about flow rates and volume calculations, about how quickly conditions could deteriorate, about the importance of preparation and evacuation plans. But she stopped herself. She had no expertise to cite, no credentials to back up her concerns. She was just someone with a feeling based on years of experience nobody knew about. "I hope you're right," she said simply. "I'm sure I am," Mayor Chen replied confidently. "But I appreciate your concern. You're always looking out for people, Theresa. That's why everyone loves you." As the mayor walked away, Theresa stayed on the bridge a while longer. She felt frustrated. She had knowledge that could help, but she could not use it without revealing her past. And she had spent 15 years building a life where that past did not exist. She remembered being Captain Holt, standing on the bridge of her ship, making decisions that affected hundreds of people. She had been confident then, sure of her authority and her judgment. People had trusted her completely. When she gave an order, it was followed without question. But that confidence had died with Peter Morrison. She walked slowly back to the anchor, her mind churning with conflicting thoughts. The restaurant was busier now as the dinner crowd began to arrive. She pushed her worries aside and focused on her work. Greet the customers, take the orders, serve the food. This was her job now, nothing more. That evening, Tom Bradley came in without his family, looking troubled. "Just me tonight," he said, sitting at the bar rather than a table. "Betty's not feeling well, and I needed to get out of the house for a bit." Theresa poured him a beer and waited. Tom looked like he had something on his mind. "I was out on the water today," he said finally. "The bay is rougher than usual. Wind's picking up from the east. That storm is going to be bad, Theresa. Really bad." "Are you securing your boat?" Theresa asked. "Already done. Double-tied everything, moved it to the safest mooring. I've been fishing these waters for 30 years, and I've learned to trust my instincts. This feels wrong." "Have you told anyone? The mayor?" Tom laughed bitterly. "I tried. He patted me on the shoulder and told me I was being overly cautious. Said the meteorologists know better than some old fisherman." Theresa's jaw tightened. She knew exactly how Tom felt. "Your instincts are probably right. You feel it too, don't you?" Tom looked at her intently. "I've always thought you understood the sea better than you let on. The way you look at the water, the way you read the sky. That's not something you learn from running a restaurant." "I used to spend time near the ocean," Theresa said carefully, "before I came here." "Doing what?" Theresa hesitated. Then she said, "Working on boats." It was not quite a lie, but it was far from the full truth. Tom nodded thoughtfully, accepting the vague answer. "Well, whatever experience you have, I trust your judgment. If you think this storm is going to be bad, I believe you." "I hope we're both wrong," Theresa said sincerely. But she did not think they were wrong. That night, Theresa could not sleep. She lay in bed listening to the wind pick up outside. The first drops of rain began to fall around midnight, pattering against her window. She got up and went to her window, watching the storm roll in. The memories came flooding back, stronger than usual. She remembered the night of Peter's death with painful clarity. She had been on the bridge of the MV Atlantic crossing, studying the weather reports with growing concern. The storm was supposed to pass to the north, but it was not following the predicted path. It was moving directly toward them instead. "Captain, should we change course?" her first officer, David Martinez, had asked. Theresa had studied the charts. Every option had risks. If they turned south, they would add hours to their journey and face different weather hazards. If they maintained course, they would go through the edge of the storm. If they turned north, they would face the worst of it. "We'll maintain course but reduce speed," she had decided. "The storm should pass ahead of us. We'll ride out the tail end. Alert all crew to secure everything and stay inside except for essential duties." It had been the right decision based on available information. But the storm had intensified unexpectedly. What should have been the tail end became the full force of the tempest. Waves had grown from 15 feet to 30 feet in less than an hour. The wind had increased from gale force to hurricane force. And Peter Morrison, who had been checking cargo tie-downs and essential duty, had been on deck at the wrong moment. Theresa had given the order for all hands below deck as soon as she realized how bad the storm was getting. But the order had come 30 seconds too late. 30 seconds that had cost a young man his life. She had stood on the bridge, drenched and exhausted, as they searched for Peter in the raging sea. She had known it was hopeless, but they had searched for hours anyway. She had made the radio calls, coordinated with rescue services, done everything properly, and it had not mattered. Back in the present, standing at her window in Brookhaven, Theresa wiped away tears. 15 years had passed, and the guilt was still as fresh as if it had happened yesterday. She had made the right decisions. Everyone had told her so. But right decisions sometimes had terrible consequences. She had walked away from the sea because she could not bear to make those decisions anymore. She could not bear the weight of responsibility for other people's lives. In her restaurant, the worst consequence of a wrong decision was a ruined meal or an unhappy customer. Nobody died because she made a mistake. But now, watching this storm develop, she felt the old instincts stirring. She felt the responsibility she had tried to bury rising up inside her. Something bad was going to happen. She could feel it. And she had knowledge that could help. Experience that could save lives. But using that knowledge meant revealing who she was. It meant confronting the past she had spent 15 years running from. It meant risking failure again, risking more guilt, risking more pain. Theresa went back to bed, but did not sleep. She lay there listening to the rain intensify, listening to the wind howl, and feeling the weight of decision pressing down on her once again. By morning, she would have to choose. Stay silent and remain safe in her quiet life, or speak up and risk everything she had built. The rain fell harder. Saturday morning arrived with heavy gray clouds and constant rain. Theresa had barely slept. She went downstairs to the restaurant before dawn and made herself coffee, standing at the window and watching the storm. The rain was already impressive, falling in sheets that made it difficult to see across the street. The wind had picked up significantly, and according to the latest weather report she had checked at 3 in the morning, this was just the beginning. The main storm system would not arrive until afternoon. The anchor did not open until 10 on Saturdays, but Theresa knew she would not have many customers today anyway. People would stay home in weather like this. That was good. People should stay home. But what about those who could not stay home? What about those who lived in low-lying areas near the river? What about the elderly who might not understand the danger? What about children who might be playing too close to the water? She thought about Emma Chen and her bright, curious eyes. She thought about all the children in Brookhaven who trusted that the adults would keep them safe. She thought about Peter Morrison, whose life had been cut short because she had not realized the danger quickly enough. At 8 o'clock, Pastor Michael Williams knocked on the door of the restaurant. Theresa let him in, noting that he was completely soaked despite his rain jacket and umbrella. "Michael, what are you doing out in this weather?" "I wanted to check on you," he said, shaking off water. "I know you get anxious about storms. Are you all right?" Theresa poured him coffee and they sat together in the empty restaurant. Outside, the rain continued its relentless assault. "Michael," Theresa said slowly, "I'm worried about this storm. Really worried." "So am I," he admitted. "I've been watching the river. It's going to flood, Theresa, I'm sure of it. The question is how bad it will be." "Have you talked to the mayor?" "I tried calling him this morning. He said the emergency services are monitoring the situation and they'll issue warnings if necessary. He told me not to worry." Theresa's hands tightened around her coffee cup. "That's not good enough." Michael looked at her with new interest. "You sound very certain." "I am certain," Theresa said. Then, making a decision, she continued. "Michael, before I came to Brookhaven, I worked at sea for 25 years. I was a ship's captain. I know how to read weather and water, and I'm telling you, this town is in serious danger." Michael's eyes widened, but he did not look shocked. "I thought it was something like that. You have the bearing of someone who commanded. Why did you leave?" "That's a story for another time. Right now, we need to focus on this storm. The river is going to flood, probably worse than anyone in this town has seen in their lifetime. People need to evacuate from low-lying areas. They need to prepare." "But you're not in any official position," Michael said practically. "Neither am I, really. How can we convince people?" "I don't know," Theresa admitted. "But we have to try." They spent the next hour calling people. Michael called the members of his church, especially those living near the river. Theresa called her regular customers, warning them to move to higher ground. Some people listened. Many did not. They had lived in Brookhaven their whole lives and had never seen a serious flood. Why should they believe it would happen now? By 10 o'clock, the rain had intensified even more. The wind was now strong enough to bend trees. Theresa and Michael ventured out to the bridge to check the river's level. What they saw made Theresa's blood run cold. The river was now at the top of its banks, churning brown and angry. Debris floated in the current, tree branches, trash, things torn loose from upriver. And the rain was still getting heavier. "Oh God," Michael whispered. "We need to get to the mayor now," Theresa said urgently. "We need him to issue an evacuation order for the riverside areas immediately." They hurried to the town hall, fighting against the wind and rain. Mayor Chen was there with several town council members, looking worried but not yet panicked. "Pastor Williams, Theresa, what brings you out in this weather?" the mayor asked. "Robert, you need to issue an evacuation order," Michael said firmly. "The river is going to flood. It's going to flood badly. The emergency services are monitoring the situation. The emergency services are wrong, Theresa interrupted. I've seen the river. I've seen the weather data. You have maybe 2 hours before the water goes over the banks, maybe less. People need to evacuate now. Mayor Chen looked at Theresa with a frown. With all due respect, Theresa, you run a restaurant. What makes you think you understand this better than the professionals? This was the moment. Theresa could back down, could stay hidden in her safe, quiet life. Or she could step forward and use the expertise she had spent 15 years denying. She thought of Emma Chen. She thought of all the children in this town. Because I was a ship's captain for 25 years, Theresa said clearly. I commanded cargo vessels across the Atlantic. I've navigated through hurricanes and storms that would terrify most people. I know how to read weather patterns, water conditions, and danger signs. And I'm telling you, Mayor Chen, this town is about to face the worst flooding in its history. You need to act now. The room fell silent. Everyone stared at Theresa. She had revealed her secret, the identity she had hidden for so long. There was no taking it back now. Mayor Chen looked stunned. You were a ship's captain? Yes. Captain Theresa Holt of the MV Atlantic Crossing and several other vessels before that. You can verify it if you want, but we don't have time. We need to evacuate people now. The mayor looked torn, uncertain. But one of the council members, a woman named Patricia, spoke up. I remember that name. Captain Theresa Holt. You were famous in the shipping industry. My brother worked for a competing company and he used to talk about you. You were one of the best captains on the Atlantic routes. That was a long time ago, Theresa said. But the skills don't disappear. Please, Mayor Chen, trust me on this. The mayor looked out the window at the raging storm, then back at Theresa. Finally, he nodded. All right. Patricia, start calling residents in the riverside areas. Tell them to evacuate to the community center on the hill. Pastor Williams, can your church provide shelter too? Already planning on it, Michael said. I'll help with the evacuation, Theresa said. She was interrupted by a loud crash of thunder and a cry from outside. They all rushed to the window. A section of the riverbank had given way, and water was starting to pour into River Street. The flooding had begun, faster than even Theresa had predicted. We're out of time, Theresa said grimly. We need to get people out now. The next hour was chaos. The mayor issued emergency alerts. The police and fire department went door to door in the riverside areas. Volunteers, including Theresa and Pastor Michael, helped elderly residents evacuate. The rain continued to pour, and the water level continued to rise. Theresa moved through the emergency with calm efficiency, her old training taking over. She coordinated volunteers, helped people gather essential belongings, ensured that everyone was accounted for. She felt the weight of command settling on her shoulders again, but this time, she did not fight it. People needed help, and she had the skills to provide it. By noon, most of the riverside residents had been evacuated to the community center and the church. The water was now several feet deep on River Street and rising. Boats and cars were floating. Buildings were flooding. The downtown area was becoming an island, with water on all sides. Theresa stood in the community center, water dripping from her clothes, mentally checking off her list of evacuees. They had gotten everyone out. Thank God, they had gotten everyone out. Theresa, the mayor said, approaching her with gratitude in his eyes. Thank you. If you hadn't pushed me to act, I don't want to think about what could have happened. We're not done yet, Theresa said. The storm is still intensifying. We need to make sure everyone stays safe until this passes. But even as she said it, a terrible thought occurred to her. She had been so focused on the residential areas that she had forgotten about one place. Her stomach dropped. The school, she said suddenly. What about the school? The school? The mayor looked confused. School's closed on Saturday. There's nobody there. Are you sure? I'm sure. All the weekend activities were canceled because of the storm warning. Theresa felt relief wash over her. Of course. The school would be empty. There was no reason for anyone to be there in this weather. But then Patricia, the council member, gasped. Oh no! Oh no, the field trip! What field trip? The mayor asked. Mrs. Anderson's class. They were supposed to go to the museum today, but it got rescheduled to yesterday because of the weather forecast. They came back late yesterday and were supposed to stay overnight at the school. It was a whole big thing, an educational sleepover. They were going to leave this morning, but the storm came earlier than expected, Theresa finished, her heart sinking. How many children? 20 students from the 4th grade plus 2 teachers. They were in the school's second-floor assembly room for the sleepover activities. And nobody thought to evacuate them? The mayor looked horrified.
Everyone assumed they had already left. The emergency alert system doesn't cover the school building separately, and Mrs. Anderson doesn't always check her phone when she's supervising activities. Theresa was already moving toward the door. Which school? Brookhaven Elementary, on School Street. But Theresa, you can't... School Street runs right along the river, Theresa said, her mind racing through the town's geography. That area is completely flooded now. The water must be 10 feet deep, at least. The fire department will get them out, the mayor said, reaching for his radio. But Theresa could see the problem before he even made the call. The fire trucks were designed for fires, not deep water rescues. The boats in town were small fishing vessels, not equipped for rescue operations in flood conditions. And the school building was old, built right at the water line. If the foundation was compromised... She rushed to the window. Through the rain, she could barely see the school building in the distance. But what she did see made her blood run cold. The water around the building was churning violently. As she watched, a section of the school's yard fence collapsed into the flood. The building is going to fail, she said quietly. The foundation can't handle this much water pressure. We have maybe an hour, probably less, before that building becomes unstable. If it collapses with those children inside... The room fell silent. Everyone understood what she was not saying. The fire department is trying to reach them, the mayor said after speaking into his radio. But they're having trouble. The water is too deep and the current is too strong. They're trying to get boats around the other side, but it will take too long, Theresa finished. She looked around the room at all the frightened faces, at the parents who were just realizing their children might be in danger, at the officials who had no idea what to do. And she felt it again. The weight of command, the responsibility for lives, the terrible burden of decision. She had run from this for 15 years. She had sworn never to put herself in this position again. She had promised herself she would never again be responsible for whether people lived or died. But 20 children were trapped in a failing building. 20 children who trusted adults to keep them safe. 20 children like Peter Morrison. Young, innocent, their whole lives ahead of them. Theresa closed her eyes briefly. When she opened them, she was no longer the restaurant owner. She was Captain Theresa Holt, and she had a mission to complete. I need boats, she said clearly, her voice carrying the tone of command. Small boats that can navigate through the flooded streets. I need people who know how to handle them, and I need them now. The community center erupted into activity. Theresa stood at the center of it all, her mind working with the clarity and precision that had guided her through countless storms at sea. This was different, yes, but the principles were the same. Assess the situation. Identify resources. Create a plan. Execute with discipline and adapt as needed. Tom, she called out, spotting the fisherman across the room. Your boat, is it still at the marina? Tom Bradley pushed through the crowd. Yes, double tide like I said, but Theresa, in these conditions, I know the conditions. Can you get to it? Probably. The marina is on higher ground, but navigating through the flooded streets, I'll handle the navigation. Who else has boats? Within minutes, they had identified 5 people with small boats that might be accessible. Tom Bradley, Jack Morrison, no relation to Peter, though the name made Theresa's heart ache. Young Luis Rodriguez, who ran the bait shop. Old Harry Walsh from the Navy, and surprisingly, Pastor Michael Williams. I have a small rowboat, Michael explained. I use it for fishing sometimes. It's at my house, which is on high ground. Perfect, Theresa said. We'll need all of them. Mayor Chen, I need you to coordinate communication. Get someone to the school building if possible. We need to establish contact with the teachers inside. They need to know we're coming, and they need to keep the children calm and on the upper floors. I'm on it, the mayor said, no longer questioning her authority. Patricia, I need blankets and dry clothes ready for when we bring the children back. Hot drinks, medical supplies in case anyone is injured. Set up a triage area. Patricia nodded and began organizing volunteers. Theresa turned to the 5 boat owners. Listen carefully. This is not going to be easy. The water is deep and the current is strong. Debris is floating everywhere. It could damage our boats or hurt us. We need to work as a coordinated team, not individual heroes. I'll lead. You follow my commands exactly. No arguments, no second guessing. Out there, I'm your captain. Understood? The men looked at her, really looked at her, and saw something they had never noticed before. They saw the authority of someone who had commanded at sea, someone who had faced storms and danger and kept hundreds of people safe. They saw Captain Holt. Understood, Captain, Tom said formally, and the others nodded. Good. We have 20 children to rescue and very little time. Let's move. The group geared up quickly. Theresa borrowed waterproof gear from the fire department. She tied her gray hair back tightly. She felt 15 years falling away, felt herself becoming someone she thought she had left behind forever. But there was no time for reflection. Every minute counted. They reached the marina through a combination of driving and wading through shallow flooding. The boats were there, battered by wind but intact. Tom's fishing boat was the largest. It could hold maybe 8 people if they were careful. The others were smaller. Tom, Jack, Luis, you're with me in the main rescue boats, Theresa commanded. Harry, Michael, you provide backup and transport the children back once we get them out. Everyone has life jackets? They all confirmed. Theresa climbed into Tom's boat with practiced ease, her muscle memory taking over. Tom started the engine, and they headed out into the flooded town. Navigating through the flooded streets of Brookhaven was like navigating a maze. Theresa stood at the bow of Tom's boat, using hand signals to guide them. The water was murky and full of debris. Street signs poked up above the surface. Cars were submerged up to their windows. Power lines dangled dangerously. Tree branch, 30 degrees left, Theresa called out. Tom steered around it expertly. The current was worse than she had expected. It pulled at the boat constantly, trying to drag them off course. But Theresa knew currents. She had spent years reading water, understanding how it moved and flowed. She used that knowledge now, finding paths where the current was weaker, avoiding areas where debris collected. Behind them, the other boats followed in formation. Theresa had positioned them so that each boat could see the one ahead, maintaining visual contact. If one boat got into trouble, the others would know immediately. The rain continued to pound down. The wind howled. Thunder crashed overhead. But Theresa remained focused, calm, directing their progress through the treacherous waters. It took 20 minutes to reach the school, though it was normally just a 5-minute walk from the community center. When the building came into view, Theresa's heart sank.
The water was even deeper here, nearly to the first-floor windows.
The current was strongest on this side of town where the river had burst its banks. The building was shaking under the water's assault, and worse, cracks were visible in the foundation. Even from a distance, Theresa could see that the structure was failing. "We don't have much time," she said to Tom. "That building could go at any moment." They pulled up to the school's second-floor windows. Inside, Theresa could see faces pressed against the glass, children's faces, frightened but trying to be brave, and two adults, the teachers, Mrs. Anderson and Mr. Roberts. Mrs. Anderson opened a window. "Thank God. We've been trying to call for help, but the phones aren't working." "We're going to get you out," Theresa said firmly, "but I need you to listen carefully and follow my instructions exactly. We'll take the children first, in small groups. Keep them calm, no panicking. Can you do that?" "Yes," Mrs.
Anderson said, her voice shaking but determined.
"The children have been very brave so far." "Good. We'll start with groups of 3. Life jackets first." The rescue operation began. Tom maneuvered the boat close to the window. Jack and Louise positioned their boats nearby. One by one, children were carefully passed through the window and into the boats. Theresa supervised every movement, checking each life jacket, holding each child steady as they made the frightening transfer. "What's your name?" she asked a small girl who was crying. "Sarah," the girl whispered. "Sarah, you're doing great. I need you to hold on to this rope and step into the boat. Mr. Tom here will catch you. Can you do that for me?" Sarah nodded, tears streaming down her face, but she did as instructed. Theresa guided her carefully, and Tom lifted her safely into the boat. "Perfect, Sarah. You're very brave." One child, then another, then another. 3 in Tom's boat, 3 in Jack's, 3 in Louise's. 9 children rescued, 11 still in the building. "Harry, Michael, take these children back to the community center," Theresa ordered. "Tom, Jack, Louise, we go back for the next group." As the first boats left with the children, Theresa heard a terrible sound, the groaning of metal and stone under stress. The building was starting to fail more rapidly. Water was now coming in through the first floor. She could see it through the ground floor windows. "Faster," she said urgently. "We need to move faster." They took the second group, 3 more children in each boat, 12 children safe, 8 still inside, plus the 2 teachers. But as they started back for the third group, the current suddenly intensified. A wall of water surged around the building as more of the river broke through upstream. Tom's boat was pushed violently sideways. "Hold steady," Theresa commanded. She grabbed a rope and tied it to a secure point on the school's exterior, creating an anchor line. "Use the rope to pull against the current." Tom fought the wheel, the engine straining. Slowly they maneuvered back into position, but now the water was churning more violently. Debris was coming faster, branches, pieces of buildings, a propane tank that made everyone's heart stop as it floated past. "We can't keep doing this," Jack said from his boat. "It's too dangerous." "We don't have a choice," Theresa said flatly. "There are still 8 children and 2 adults in there. We're getting them out." She looked at Jack directly, her eyes hard with determination. "I lost someone once because I gave up too soon. I won't do it again. Now get into position for the next transfer." Something in her voice, in her gaze, made Jack nod and maneuver his boat back into place. The third group of children came out. 3 more, 3 more, 3 more. 6 left inside, plus the teachers. And then it happened. With a terrible cracking sound, a section of the school's foundation gave way.
The entire building shifted, tilting slightly toward the river.
Water rushed into the first floor with increased force. The windows on the second floor were now closer to the water, but also harder to reach safely. "Mrs. Anderson," Theresa shouted, "is everyone okay?" "We're okay, but the floor is tilting. Some furniture fell. We're scared." "I know. Stay calm. We're coming for you right now. Move to the far corner of the room, away from the riverside. Go. She could see Mrs. Anderson herding the remaining children and Mr. Roberts to the safer corner. But the window they had been using was now too dangerous to access. It was on the compromised side of the building. We need to go around to the other side, Theresa said, but the current is strongest there. Captain, maybe we should wait for the fire department, Tom began. There's no time. That building is going to collapse, maybe in minutes. We go now. She studied the water, reading its flow patterns, identifying the safest route. It would be difficult, dangerous, but possible. Follow me, single file, stay in my wake. Theresa had Tom navigate around the building, fighting the current every foot of the way. The engine roared, the boat shuddered, but Tom was an excellent boatman, and with Theresa's guidance they made it around to the other side. The window on this side was partially blocked by a fallen tree. They would have to get creative. Luis, bring your boat alongside mine, Theresa ordered. We'll create a platform between the boats. Jack, you guard our rear. Watch for debris. The two boats maneuvered together, and Theresa climbed carefully from one to the other, positioning herself to reach the window. The tree branch was in the way. She had to move it. Without hesitation, she grabbed the branch and pushed. It was heavy, waterlogged, resistant. But Theresa had spent years working with cargo and heavy equipment. She knew how to use leverage, how to use her weight efficiently. The branch shifted more. Finally moved enough to clear the window. Mrs. Anderson, this window, now! The teacher appeared at the now accessible window with two children. I can only get to this side with two at a time because of the tilt. The floor is too unstable. Then we'll make 2 trips. Pass them through. The children came through the window. Theresa caught them, held them steady, passed them to Tom and Luis. 2 more safe. 4 children and 2 adults left in the building. The building groaned again. More cracking sounds. The tilt increased. It's going, Jack shouted. The whole thing is going. 1 more trip, Theresa said grimly. Tom, get these children to Michael and Harry. Jack, Luis, stay with me. Captain, if we stay, I said stay with me.
Tom reluctantly moved away with the 2 children. Theresa, Jack, and Luis repositioned their boats at the window. Inside, they could see Mrs. Anderson struggling to get to the window with the last 2 children. The floor was tilted so badly now that they had to hold onto furniture to avoid sliding. "Mr. Roberts!" Theresa called. "Help her!" The male teacher pushed through, half carrying one child, dragging furniture to create a path. Mrs. Anderson followed with the other child. They reached the window. Mr. Roberts passed the first child through. Theresa caught the girl. It was Emma Chen. Of course it was Emma. "I've got you, Emma," Theresa said, holding the terrified child close for a moment before passing her to Luis. "You're safe now." The second child came through, safe, into Jack's boat. "Now you two!" Theresa shouted to the teachers. Mr. Roberts started to climb through the window, but the building gave another terrible lurch. He lost his balance, fell back into the room. Mrs. Anderson screamed. "Now," Theresa commanded. "Both of you, now!" Mrs. Anderson climbed through. Theresa and Jack pulled her into the boat. Mr. Roberts tried again, got halfway through the window. The building was collapsing in slow motion, pieces breaking off, walls cracking. "Grab my hand!" Theresa stretched out as far as she dared, leaning over the water. Mr. Roberts reached for her. Their hands connected. Theresa pulled with all her strength. Jack grabbed her around the waist to keep her from falling in. Mr. Roberts scrambled through the window and tumbled into the boat just as a large section of the school's wall collapsed behind him. "Go!" Theresa shouted. "Go, go, go!" The boats roared away from the school. Behind them, the building gave one final groan and then collapsed into the churning water with a terrible crash. Waves radiated out from the destruction. The boats rocked violently, but stayed upright. They had gotten everyone out. All 20 children. Both teachers, everyone. Theresa sat down heavily in the boat, suddenly exhausted. Her hands were shaking. Her heart was pounding. But she had done it. She had gotten them all out safely. Tom came alongside them with an empty boat, having transferred the children to Harry and Michael. He looked at Theresa with awe and gratitude. "Captain, I've never seen anything like that. You were incredible." "I was just doing what needed to be done," Theresa said quietly. But she knew it was more than that. For the first time in 15 years, she had faced the responsibility of command and had not failed. 22 people had depended on her decisions, and she had brought them all to safety. "Let's get back," she said. "These people need medical attention and dry clothes." The journey back to the community center was slower, more careful. The children and teachers were divided among the boats, wrapped in emergency blankets, frightened, but alive. Theresa rode with Emma Chen, who clung to her. "You saved us," Emma whispered. "You're a real hero." Theresa looked down at the little girl who loved her ocean stories. "You were very brave, Emma. All of you were." "Are you really a ship captain? Is that where you learned to sail in storms?" "Yes," Theresa said simply. "I was a captain for a long time." "Will you tell me real stories now? Real ocean stories?" "Yes, Emma. I think I will." The community center erupted in cheers when the boats arrived with the last of the children. Parents who had been waiting in terror rushed forward to embrace their kids. Mrs. Chen sobbed as she held Emma, thanking Theresa over and over. "You saved her," Linda Chen kept saying. "You saved my baby." Theresa accepted the gratitude with grace, but deflected as much as she could. Tom, Jack, Luis, Harry, and Michael all helped. It was a team effort. But everyone knew the truth. Theresa had been the leader. She had made the decisions, guided them through impossible conditions, and brought everyone home safely. The quiet restaurant owner had revealed herself to be an experienced captain, someone who knew how to command in crisis. As the excitement settled and the children were being checked by medical volunteers, Mayor Chen approached Theresa. His expression was a mixture of gratitude, respect, and embarrassment. "Theresa, Captain Holt, I don't know how to thank you. If you hadn't insisted on the evacuation earlier, if you hadn't led the rescue, I don't want to think about what would have happened." "You would have figured it out," Theresa said, though they both knew that was not entirely true. "Why didn't you tell anyone?" the mayor asked. "All these years you've been here, you had all this experience, all this expertise, and you never said anything. Why?" Theresa was silent for a moment. Then she said, "Because I was running away. From my past. From responsibilities. From failure." She told him the story then, briefly. About being captain of the MV Atlantic Crossing. About the storm. About Peter Morrison. About the guilt that had driven her away from the sea and into hiding. "I thought if I walked away from command, I would never have to face that kind of failure again," she explained. "I thought I could just be a simple restaurant owner and never again be responsible for whether someone lived or died." "But you are responsible," Mayor Chen said gently. "You always have been. Not in a legal sense, not in the way you think. But when you have skills that can help people, when you have knowledge that can save lives, you have a responsibility to use it. You proved that today." "I was so scared,"
Theresa admitted. When I saw those children in that building, I was terrified that I would fail again, that I would make the wrong decision and someone would die because of me. But you didn't fail. You saved them all. This time, Theresa said quietly. But what about next time? What about next time? The mayor countered. Life has no guarantees, Captain Holt. You know that better than anyone. Sometimes we make all the right decisions and tragedy still happens. That's not failure. That's just life. Real failure is having the ability to help and choosing not to act. Theresa thought about that. She thought about Peter Morrison and how she had done everything right and still lost him. She thought about the 15 years she had spent hiding, denying who she was. She thought about Emma Chen and the 19 other children who were alive right now because she had finally chosen to act. You're right, she said finally. You're right. The storm continued for another 12 hours, but the worst had passed. The rain gradually lessened. The water began to slowly recede. Brookhaven had suffered significant damage, but no lives had been lost. The early evacuation that Theresa had insisted on had saved countless people. As evening arrived and the situation stabilized, people began sharing the story of the rescue. It spread through the community center, then through phone calls and texts to those who had been evacuated to other locations. The story of how the quiet restaurant owner had revealed herself to be a legendary ship's captain and had led a daring rescue of trapped children. Tom Bradley found Theresa sitting alone in a corner, drinking coffee and watching the reunited families with tired eyes. "You know, you're going to be famous after this," he said, settling down beside her. "Everyone is going to want to know about Captain Theresa Holt." "I didn't want to be famous," Theresa said. "I wanted to be left alone." "Too late for that now," Tom said with a small smile. "But maybe that's not such a bad thing. You've been carrying a lot of weight, Theresa. Maybe it's time to let some of it go." "I don't know how." "You started today. You faced your fear of command, and you succeeded. That's a beginning." Theresa thought about the moment when she had reached out her hand to Mr. Roberts, when the building had been collapsing behind him, when she had had to choose between her safety and his. She had chosen to risk herself, and it had worked out. But it might not have. He could have fallen. She could have fallen. They both could have died. The old fear whispered in her mind. What if you make the wrong choice? What if someone dies because of your decisions? But a new voice, stronger, answered. What if someone lives because of my decisions? What if I save them, like I saved those children today? Isn't that worth the risk? Pastor Michael Williams came over and sat with them. The church sustained some damage, but it's structurally sound. We can continue to house people until their homes are safe to return to. "Thank you, Michael," Theresa said. "Thank you for believing me this morning when I told you about my past." "I always knew you were more than you appeared to be," Michael said. "Though I admit, I didn't guess legendary ship's captain. That was a surprise." They sat together in comfortable silence for a while. Outside, the rain had finally stopped. The storm had passed. "What will you do now?" Michael asked Theresa. "Will you go back to the sea?" Theresa considered the question. Part of her felt the pull of the ocean, the desire to command a ship again, to navigate by the stars and feel the deck beneath her feet. But another part of her loved Brookhaven, loved the anchor, loved the community she had built here. "I don't know," she admitted. "I need to think about it." "Well, whatever you decide, Know that you'll always have a home here, Michael said. This town needs you, Theresa. Not just as a captain, but as the person you've been all these years. The kind woman who feeds people, who tells children stories, who cares about her neighbors. I can be both, Theresa said slowly, realizing the truth of it as she spoke. I don't have to choose between Captain Holt and restaurant owner Theresa. They're both me. Yes, Michael agreed. They are. Late that night, after most people had settled down to sleep in the community center, Theresa stepped outside. The storm had passed, and the clouds were breaking up. Stars were visible between the gaps, bright and clear. She walked carefully through the receding floodwaters to the bridge, the same place where she had stood yesterday and worried about the coming storm. The river was still high, but no longer raging. The immediate danger had passed. She stood there for a long time, thinking about her life. About the 25 years she had spent at sea, commanding ships and crews. About the night Peter Morrison died. About the 15 years she had spent in Brookhaven, hiding from her past. And about today, when she had finally faced her fears and discovered that she was still capable, still strong, still able to lead. She thought about Peter's parents, whom she had met at the memorial service so many years ago. She thought about what they had said to her. Thank you for doing everything you could. Thank you for not giving up on the search. Thank you for caring about our son. At the time, she had not believed them. She had thought they were just being kind, trying to make her feel less guilty. But maybe they had meant it. Maybe they had understood that she had done her best. That sometimes tragedy happens despite everyone's best efforts. That it was not her failure, but simply a terrible circumstance. She could not bring Peter Morrison back. She could not change what had happened. But she could choose how to live with it. She could let the guilt destroy her, force her into hiding, prevent her from ever helping anyone again. Or she could accept what had happened, forgive herself, and use her skills to help others when they needed her. Today she had saved 22 people. 22 lives that would have been lost without her intervention. Did that make up for Peter? No. Nothing could make up for a lost life. But it meant something. It mattered. I'm sorry, Peter, she whispered to the night. I'm sorry I couldn't save you. But I promise I won't let your death mean that I never help anyone again. I promise I'll use what I learned from you, from that terrible night, to be better, to save others when I can. That's the best I can do. The stars seemed to shine a little brighter. The river seemed a little calmer. And Theresa felt something inside her shift and settle. A weight she had carried for 15 years finally beginning to ease. She was Captain Theresa Holt. She was also Theresa the restaurant owner. She was a woman who had failed once and been terrified of failing again, but who had found the courage to try anyway. She was someone who could help, who could lead, who could make a difference. And she was going to be okay. The next few days were busy with cleanup and recovery. The floodwaters receded slowly, leaving mud and debris throughout the town. Homes had been damaged, businesses had been flooded, and the school where the children had been trapped was a total loss. But everyone was alive. Everyone was safe. Theresa worked alongside the townspeople, helping with the cleanup effort. But she also found herself in an unexpected role.
People kept asking her for advice about safety procedures, about structural integrity of water-damaged buildings, about preparedness planning, about leadership during crisis. She had expertise that Brookhaven needed, and people now knew it. Mayor Chen approached her on the third day after the storm. "Captain Holt, I have a proposition for you." "Just Theresa is fine," she said. She had accepted that her secret was out, but she did not need the formality of a title. "Theresa, then. The town council met last night, and we want to create a new position. Emergency Management Coordinator. Someone to help us prepare for future disasters, to create safety plans, to provide expertise. We want you for the position." Theresa was surprised. "Mayor, I'm not qualified for that. I was a ship's captain, not an emergency management expert." "You have leadership skills. You have crisis management experience. You can read situations and make quick, effective decisions. That's exactly what we need. And you can learn the rest. What do you say?" Theresa thought about it. It would mean fully embracing her past, fully integrating Captain Holt with her current life. It would mean taking on responsibility again, the very thing she had run from. But it would also mean helping her community. It would mean using her skills for good. It would mean that what she had learned, even the painful lessons from Peter's death, could serve a purpose. "Can I do it part-time?" she asked. "I don't want to give up the anchor." "Part-time would be perfect. Maybe 20 hours a week? You could set your own schedule." "Then yes," Theresa said. "I'll do it." Word spread quickly that Captain Holt was staying in Brookhaven and taking on this new role. People who had known her only as the restaurant owner began to see her differently, but they did not treat her like a stranger or a celebrity. She was still Theresa, still the woman who had served them meals and listened to their stories for 15 years. Now they just knew more about her. Emma Chen came to the anchor the day it reopened, pulling her mother behind her. "Theresa! Captain Theresa!" she called excitedly. "Mom says you can tell me real ocean stories now." Theresa laughed, a genuine, happy sound. "Does she? Well, sit down and I'll tell you about the time I saw a blue whale." As she told Emma the story, a true story this time, not a sanitized version, Theresa realized how good it felt to be honest, to share the experiences that had shaped her, to acknowledge who she had been and who she was now. Over the following weeks, Theresa began her new role. She researched emergency management best practices. She created evacuation plans for different disaster scenarios. She worked with the fire and police departments to improve their coordination. She organized training sessions for volunteers. But she also continued running the anchor. The restaurant became even more popular as people came not just for the excellent food, but to talk with the now famous Captain Holt. She found that she enjoyed sharing her stories, enjoyed teaching people about the sea and leadership and crisis management. One evening, Tom Bradley came in and sat at the bar. "You seem happy," he observed. "I am," Theresa said, surprised to realize it was true. "For the first time in 15 years, I feel like myself again. I feel whole." "It suits you," Tom said. "The honesty, the openness. You were always a good person, Theresa, but you seemed like you were holding something back. Now you're fully present." "I was afraid of my past," Theresa admitted. "I thought if people knew about my failure, they would reject me. But you all accepted me anyway. You saw the failure and the success, and you judged me as a complete person.
That's what communities do, Tom said. We see each other fully, flaws and all, and we decide to care anyway.
A month after the storm, Brookhaven held a town meeting to discuss rebuilding and future preparedness. Theresa presented her emergency management plans. She talked about creating safe zones, establishing communication protocols, and training community response teams. But she also talked about something else. The most important lesson from the storm, she said, is that we need each other. No one person can handle a crisis alone. We need the fishermen who know the water. We need the people who are strong enough to help evacuate. We need those who can provide medical care. We need those who can keep calm and comfort frightened children. Everyone has something to contribute. She paused, looking around at the familiar faces of her community. I was afraid to contribute for a long time, she continued.
I had skills that could help, but I didn't use them because I was scared of failing again. I let fear control me. But during the storm, I learned something. The opposite of failure is not success. It's never trying. Real failure is having the ability to help and choosing not to act.
The room was silent, everyone listening. So I'm asking each of you to think about what you can contribute. What skills do you have? What knowledge? What strengths? Because the next time we face a crisis, and there will be a next time, we'll need all of us working together. We'll need everyone to step up, even when it's scary. Especially when it's scary. The applause that followed was long and heartfelt. After the meeting, Pastor Michael found Theresa. That was a good speech. You've changed a lot in the past month. I've changed a lot in the past 15 years, Theresa corrected. But I finally stopped running away. That makes all the difference.
Have you thought about contacting Peter Morrison's parents?
Michael asked gently. Maybe telling them about what happened here. Theresa had thought about it. Many times. I'm not sure. What would I say? I let your son die, but I saved some other people? That doesn't seem right. Or maybe you could say, I've finally found peace with what happened. I've learned to forgive myself and use what I learned to help others. I think Peter would be proud. That might bring them some peace too. Theresa considered this. Maybe. Let me think about it. But the next day, she did write a letter. She wrote to Peter's parents, telling them about Brookhaven, about the storm, about the rescue. She told them that not a day went by when she did not think about their son. She told them that she had finally learned to live with what had happened, to use the painful lessons to help others. She did not expect a response. She sent the letter for herself, to close a chapter. But 2 weeks later, she received a reply. Peter's mother wrote that they had never blamed her. They had known she had done everything possible. They had grieved for their son, but they had also worried about Captain Holt, knowing how hard she had taken his death. They were glad she had found peace. They were glad she was helping others. They believed Peter would have wanted that. And they thanked her for never forgetting him. Theresa cried when she read the letter, but they were tears of release, not pain. Tears of forgiveness and acceptance and peace. She framed the letter and put it in her apartment, next to a photo of the MV Atlantic crossing and a picture of Brookhaven's harbor. Her past and her present, together at last. Life in Brookhaven slowly returned to normal, though the town was changed by the experience of the flood. People were more cautious, more prepared, more aware of potential dangers. They had learned not to take safety for granted. The school was being rebuilt on higher ground. The damaged homes were being repaired. The town had applied for disaster relief funds and was implementing Theresa's safety recommendations. And the anchor remained the heart of the community, a place where people gathered to eat, to talk, to share their lives. Theresa still ran the restaurant, still served her excellent seafood, still chatted with customers. But now she also led emergency preparedness workshops in the back room. She trained volunteer rescue teams. She consulted with local officials on safety matters. She was fully herself at last, both the captain and the restaurant owner, both the leader and the community member, both the person haunted by past failure and the person proud of present success. 6 months after the storm, on a clear spring day, Theresa stood on the new bridge that had been built to replace the damaged one. The river flowed peacefully below, contained within its banks. Boats moved in the harbor. Life continued. Emma Chen ran up to her with a school project. "Look, Theresa! I wrote a story about heroes!" Theresa read the story. It was about a ship's captain who saved people during a storm. The captain was brave and smart and kind. The captain was named Captain Hope. "Captain Hope," Theresa said with a smile. "I like that name." "It's you," Emma said proudly. "You gave people hope during the flood. So you're Captain Hope." "I think we all gave each other hope," Theresa said. "We worked together. We helped each other. That's what heroes do." Emma nodded seriously, then ran off to play with friends. Theresa stayed on the bridge a while longer, thinking about everything that had happened. She had run away from the sea, from command, from responsibility. She had hidden in a small town, denying who she was. She had let one terrible tragedy define her entire existence. But then the storm had come, and she had been forced to choose. Stay hidden or step forward. Let fear win or find courage. Remain broken or begin healing. She had chosen courage. She had chosen healing. And it had saved lives, including her own in a way. She thought about Peter Morrison, and for the first time in 15 years, the thought did not bring crushing guilt. It brought sadness, yes, loss, certainly, but also gratitude. Gratitude for having known him, however briefly. Gratitude for the lessons learned, however painful. Gratitude for the opportunity to use those lessons to help others. "I hope you're at peace," she said softly to the memory. "I hope you know that your life mattered. That your death, as tragic as it was, taught me things that I've used to save others. You're part of every rescue I make, every person I help. You're not forgotten." The wind picked up, carrying the scent of salt water. Theresa breathed it in deeply. The sea was in her blood. It always had been, and it always would be. But now she understood that the sea was not just the ocean. It was any water, any current, any flow. The river through Brookhaven was the sea. The rain from the storm was the sea. Every body of water she would ever encounter was the sea. And she would never run from it again. She walked back toward the anchor, ready for the evening shift. She had customers to serve, meals to prepare, stories to tell. She had emergency management meetings to attend, training sessions to lead, plans to make. She had a community that depended on her, and she would not let them down. She was Captain Theresa Holt. She was Theresa, the restaurant owner. She was a hero and a friend, a leader and a listener, someone who had failed and someone who had succeeded. She was herself, fully and completely, for the first time in 15 years. And it felt like coming home. 1 year after the storm, Brookhaven held its annual Founders' Day celebration. The town had fully recovered from the flood damage. The new school was open. New flood control measures were in place. The town had a comprehensive emergency management system, developed and led by Theresa. The day was beautiful, sunny and warm, with a gentle breeze from the sea. The celebration was held in the town square, with food vendors, games for children, and speeches from local officials. Theresa was one of the speakers. She had not wanted to be. Public speaking was not her favorite activity, but the mayor had insisted. So she stood at the podium and looked out at the assembled townspeople, many of whom she considered friends. "A year ago," she began, "this town faced one of the worst natural disasters in its history. The storm and flood threatened lives, destroyed property, and tested our community in ways we had never been tested before." She paused, gathering her thoughts. "I've learned a lot in this past year. I've learned that running from your past doesn't make it go away. I've learned that failure is not the end of the story. I've learned that communities are stronger than individuals, and that we're capable of extraordinary things when we work together." She smiled, looking at the faces in the crowd. She saw Emma Chen, now 9 years old and still fascinated by ocean stories. She saw Tom Bradley and his family. She saw Pastor Michael Williams. She saw all the people who had helped with the rescue, who had supported each other during the crisis, who had rebuilt and recovered together. "But most importantly," Theresa continued, "I've learned that it's never too late to be honest. It's never too late to step forward. It's never too late to use your skills to help others. I spent 15 years hiding who I was, afraid to take responsibility, afraid to fail again. And then the storm came, and I had to choose. I chose to act. I chose to help. And that choice changed my life." She looked directly at the section where the rescued students and teachers were sitting. 22 people are alive today because we worked together during that storm. But more than that, this entire community is stronger because we faced that challenge together. We didn't let fear paralyze us. We didn't give up. We did what needed to be done. The applause was warm and sustained, but Theresa held up her hand. "I want to say one more thing. To everyone here who has skills they're not using, knowledge they're not sharing, experiences they're hiding because they're afraid. Don't wait for a crisis to reveal yourself. The world needs what you have to offer. Your community needs it. Don't let fear keep you from being fully who you are, because you never know when your specific talents might be exactly what someone needs." She stepped back from the podium to enthusiastic applause. As she returned to her seat, Mayor Chen shook her hand warmly. "Thank you, Captain," he said. "That was perfect." "Just Theresa," she reminded him with a smile. But she knew that she would always be both. Captain Holt and Theresa. The leader and the restaurant owner. The person who had failed and the person who had succeeded. All of it together, making her who she was. After the speeches, the celebration continued with food and music. The anchor had a booth selling her famous fish tacos. Theresa worked the booth with Jenny and Marcus, chatting with customers, laughing at jokes. enjoying the beautiful day. At one point, a young woman approached the booth. She was in her mid-20s with an official-looking badge identifying her as a reporter from a regional newspaper. "Miss Holt, I'm Sarah Jenkins from the Coastal Times. I was hoping to interview you about your career as a ship's captain and how you came to be in Brookhaven. Your story is fascinating, and I think our readers would love to hear it." Theresa had given a few interviews over the past year, though she always tried to keep the focus on the community rather than herself. But she had learned that sharing her story could help others who were struggling with guilt or failure or fear. If her experience could encourage even one person to be braver, to be more honest, to step forward when they were needed, it was worth the discomfort of publicity. "All right," she agreed, "but not today. This is a day for the community, not for me. Come by the Anchor tomorrow afternoon and we'll talk then." "Thank you," Sarah said gratefully. "I really appreciate it. Can I ask just one quick question?" "Sure." "Do you ever miss it? Being a ship's captain? Commanding a vessel at sea?" Theresa thought about the question. A year ago, she would have immediately said no. She would have insisted that she was happy with her quiet life and wanted nothing to do with the sea. But now, a year later, she could be more honest. "Sometimes," she admitted, "I miss the vastness of the ocean. I miss the challenge of navigation. I miss the feeling of standing on the bridge and commanding a ship. It was a good life, and I was good at it." "So why don't you go back?" "Because I have a good life here, too. I have a community I love. I have work that matters. I have friends and responsibilities. I don't need to choose between the sea and the land. I can honor both parts of my life." Sarah nodded, making notes. "That's a great quote. Thank you, Miss Holt." As the reporter walked away, Tom Bradley came up to the booth. "Still turning down that consulting job with the shipping company?" "Still turning it down," Theresa confirmed. A major shipping company had indeed contacted her, offering her a well-paid consulting position based on her years of experience. "Brookhaven is my home now. I'm not leaving." "Good," Tom said, "because we need you here." "I need to be here," Theresa said. "This is where I belong." The celebration continued into the evening. As the sun began to set, painting the sky in brilliant colors, Theresa walked down to the harbor one more time. She stood at the water's edge, watching the fishing boats and pleasure craft, listening to the cry of seagulls, smelling the familiar scent of salt and sea. She remembered standing on the deck of the MV Atlantic crossing, commanding a crew of over 100 people, responsible for millions of dollars worth of cargo, navigating through some of the most challenging waters in the world. She remembered the pride she had felt, the sense of purpose, the satisfaction of a job well done. And she remembered the terrible night when everything had fallen apart, when the storm had been too powerful, when the ocean had claimed Peter Morrison despite all her efforts, when she had realized that even perfect decisions could have tragic consequences. She had run from that knowledge, had hidden from it, had built an entire life trying to avoid ever facing that kind of responsibility again. But running had not brought peace. It had only brought emptiness. Peace had come when she stopped running, when she accepted her past, both the successes and the failures, when she forgave herself for being human, for making mistakes, for not being able to control everything. When she chose to use her experience to help others, rather than letting guilt destroy her. "I'm at peace now, Peter," she said quietly to the wind and the water. "I hope you are too." She stayed at the harbor until full darkness fell and the stars came out. Then she walked back through the town, greeting people she passed, feeling the warmth of community around her. The Anchor would be closed tomorrow for her day off. She planned to spend it working on her emergency management plans and maybe going sailing with Tom. He had been teaching her about local fishing, and she had been teaching him about navigation and weather patterns. It was a fair exchange. As she climbed the stairs to her apartment above the restaurant, she felt content. Not constantly happy, life was too complex for constant happiness. But content, at peace with her choices, confident in her purpose, comfortable with who she was. She had been Captain Theresa Holt, commanding officer of ocean-going vessels. She had been Theresa, the restaurant owner, hiding from her past. Now she was both and more. A complete person, integrating all her experiences into a whole self. She looked at the framed letter from Peter Morrison's parents on her wall, at the photos of her past and present. She looked out her window at the town she had come to love, the community that had accepted her completely once they knew the truth. And she smiled. This was her life. Imperfect, complicated, marked by both tragedy and triumph. But it was her life, lived fully and honestly. She had stopped running. She had started healing. And that made all the difference. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, new responsibilities, new opportunities to help others. She would face them with the wisdom gained from her years at sea, the humility learned from failure, and the strength built from choosing courage over fear. She was ready. The sea had taught her to navigate storms. Life had taught her to navigate herself. And now, finally, she knew where she was going. Home was not a place on a map. Home was not a ship or a restaurant or even a town. Home was being fully yourself, accepting all that you had been and all that you could be, and using every part of your experience to make the world a little bit better. Theresa Holt was home at last. If this story touched you, don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe. We'd love to hear what inspired you the most. And where in the world are you watching from? Let us know below.